Okay, fantastic. I shall begin. Good morning, everybody. Am I coming through loud and clear?
Yeah, morning.
Good morning. Yes, thanks.
What a da. Croeso, welcome everyone. Fab. Okay, so I'll start kicking things off now. So just want to say a massive thank you to everyone for coming today. Welcome to the Taxi and Private Hire Vehicle Passenger Safety Discovery Show and Tell. So just to let everyone know, this session is being recorded and we're going to circulate that recording at the end of this show and tell. So if you've got any colleagues who are interested and couldn't make it, or you want to go back through it at all, please we'll send it out and you can have a view. Okay, so just to introduce the benefits of a show and tell, so that we can be open and show you what we've been up to, but also that you can ask any questions and feedback to us. So if you want to put any comments or questions on the Teams chat, we've got around 10 minutes or so at the end to answer any feedback you might have, and I'm happy to field any questions you might have on the project. My email is actually going to be on the last couple of slides, which we're going to circulate anyway. So if you want to ask me something in private, feel free to email anytime. More than happy to help. So I'll start by sort of introducing kind of who we are and what we do. So this show and tell will happen now, and then we've got another one booked in for the end of the project. We're going to update you on everything that we've done and everything that we've learnt. So we really pride ourselves in working out in the open. So I can't stress this enough. Please do let us know your thoughts. And we're really keen to engage every stakeholder, and we want to hear your thoughts. So CDPS is an arm's length body of the Welsh Government. We support public sector organisations to design and deliver services that meet the needs of the people who use them. And we're really proud to say that this work will actually impact policy outcomes using a user-centred design approach by listening and working with all stakeholders. So this visual helps explain sort of how considerations for a good project should ideally be a mixture of these three things: user needs, organisational goals, and technical constraints. So often the user needs aren't factored in, or they're not factored in enough. So as things like budgets or technical constraints are being prioritised. Of course, those things are very important, but the user needs are equally as important. And a successful project should factor all three things in, all of them in. So again, I can't stress this enough. We're one team on this. So we've been working with the taxi bill team at Welsh Government. We completely integrate our two organisations together and work as one team using agile methodologies. So if you're unsure what agile is, don't worry. We're running lots of workshops on how we work as an organisation and why we work in this way, and we'll be lightly touching on it here too. But simply putting it, agile is efficient and collaborative, and we use our combined skills to produce quality work to solve these problems. And just on a personal note, the taxi bill team have been an absolute joy to work with so far, and we look forward to working with future groups from around the public sector. So that being said, I'd like to hand over to Adrian Davis, the taxi bill manager, to explain how this work came about and from their perspective, what it's going to do. So Adrian, if you'd like to...
Morning, everyone. So I'm Adrian Davis from Welsh Government. I'm the bill manager for the taxi bill. In its programme for government, the Welsh Government made a commitment to legislate to modernise the taxi and private hire vehicle sector. And what we're aiming to do through the legislation is to address cross-bordering and reform licensing to make taxi services safer, fairer and greener. Previous reviews of the sector by the Law Commission and by the Department for Transport's Tasking and Finish Group have recommended that sharing licensing information between local authorities and with passengers could help to improve the safety and confidence of passengers to use taxis and PHVs. So we were keen to explore the benefits of sharing licensing information. And we wanted to make sure that in doing that, we took a user-centered approach to really understand how local authorities and passengers might use licensing information in real life situations. So there are two areas we're going to be looking at. We're going to look at how local authorities work with the trade to help to keep passengers safe. And we're going to look at the attitudes and behaviours of passengers to using taxis and private hire vehicles. So thinking about the local authority work, first of all, we know that local authorities have information about the cars and the drivers that they license, but they don't have information about cars and drivers licensed by other authorities, even though they might be working in their area. Through the bill, we plan to give local authorities powers to engage anyone working in their area, whether they're licensed by that authority or not. So we want to understand how local authorities do this work, whether it would be useful for them to share licensing information, what they would do with that information, how they might share it, and we want to understand what the implications are for the trade if their information is being shared between licensing authorities. The second area then is understanding the attitudes and the behaviours of passengers using taxis and private hire vehicles. So we want to understand what concerns, if any, passengers have about using licensed vehicles. What actions do passengers take at the moment to keep themselves safe when they're using taxis and PHVs? Would passengers be interested in receiving information about licence holders? And if so, how would they use it? And again, importantly, how do people working in the trade feel about their information being shared with passengers? So in doing this work, we wanted to avoid jumping to solutions. So that meant taking a user-centered approach to really understand what users in local authorities and what passengers would find useful. And we decided to work with CDPS because they've got the skills and the knowledge in user-centered design to kind of really do this effectively. And I must say, to kind of echo what James was saying, I'm very pleased with the results so far. CDPS have shown themselves to be very knowledgeable and enthusiastic about this work and easy for us to work with. And the joint project team is making really good progress so far. So I'm going to hand over to Liam now, who's going to talk about the way the joint team is working together.
Thanks a lot, Adrian. Shmai Pawb. My name's Liam Collins. I'm one of the designers here at CDPS. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk quickly about like the ways that we're working throughout this team, because obviously it's a multidisciplinary team that's working across 2 different organizations. Like the key thing is to make sure that we're all communicating and collaborating as much as we possibly can. So we use a number of different ways to help us do that. So if you pop to the next slide for me, please, James. Thanks very much. So we have what we call stand-ups on a Monday and Thursday. I'm sure most of you are familiar with these already. If you're not, a stand-up is like a really quick meeting, basically, that you tend to do at the start of the day. You can run these however you want. Some people run them every single day. We are doing them on a Monday and a Thursday. The Monday is like an opportunity for us to sort of catch up and talk about what we're going to do that week. You sort of work in a round robin approach. You know, I'm doing this. Any blockers you might have, anything that's sort of stopping you from progressing with that work and those aims throughout the week. And then we do one on a Thursday, which is kind of like a little reflection of how the week's gone. And again, if anything was blocking that work or those aims, and then we can look ahead towards the next week. Next slide, please, James. We use a program called Miro, which is like a really good interactive canvas, basically, to help you all collaborate on documents and all sort of work in a really interactive way together in real time. We use this program and we actually use one big canvas and store all of our different workshops on that one canvas, which means that like we know everything's in one place, all of our workshops are in one place, so we're not ever hunting around throughout 50 different boards. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, we use a program called Slack for daily communication. So this is like anything quick, has anyone got an answer to this? Or, I was wondering about this, or what do you think about this? Maybe some quick feedback or something like that. Again, just making sure everybody's like singing from the same hymn sheet all the time, and make sure everyone's like clued up and in the know all the time, and, all keeping that in one place. And then lastly, we use SharePoint for all of our documents. We have a shared folder on there, which means that we can, again, collaborate in real time, and there's no like duplication of documents and, version 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, final.pdf. It's all working on the same documents at the same time, and we all know where they're stored. And that is how we're trying to keep ourselves on track and keep ourselves, again, sort of playing the same tune at the same time. Okay, so now I'm going to hand over to Gabby, who's going to talk to you about the research so far.
Thank you, Liam. Hi, everyone. My name's Gabby. I'm the senior user researcher on the project. So yeah, I'm going to talk us through the user research to date that we've been planning and setting up. This is really exciting as well. So as Adrian mentioned, we're really taking a user-centered approach with this. And if anyone's not familiar with user research, then that essentially means really going out to drivers, passengers, and all of the users that might come into contact with the experiences of taxis, and making sure that their needs are embedded in the work we're doing. So it's a really exciting opportunity. So to kick things off, we started with a research planning workshop. So coming into the project, I was aware that there was lots of knowledge that already existed. This isn't a new problem space, but we did want to understand what had been done before to really build on that. So we got everybody together in a research planning workshop, and I asked all of the team questions like, what would you like to learn from the research? What assumptions are you bringing to the research? And also, what do we already know a lot about? So maybe areas that aren't quite worth focusing on if we know a lot about them already. We also started to draft a problem statement. Sorry, James. Still on that slide. So yeah, we started to draft a problem statement. So this is something that's really critical to any discovery project and really captures the problem, who's affected by the problem, and also why we need to fix it. And as well as that, we looked at who the users might be and how we might recruit them as well. Next slide, please. And then from there, we did another workshop to look at desk research. So before the workshop, we spent a lot of time looking through lots of relevant documents. So this was really great to work with Welsh Gov on. So they were able to share all of the relevant documents that they would recommend we read to kind of get up to speed and make sure we were approaching the project with a baseline understanding. So of course, we're not going to be able to match the subject matter experts' knowledge in this space, but we did want to enter it with that baseline understanding. So this was documents ranging from white papers, reports, and also consultation minutes. So we really wanted to make sure we soaked all of that up to form what our project would focus on. So we brought this into a workshop again to really kind of iron out what we'd learned and where we wanted to focus our research. So maybe the areas that we knew less about, we could count as in scope, and then the things that we felt like we knew a lot about, we could count as out of scope. So this helped us really narrow down what we were going to focus on. Next slide, please. And this helped us really form a solid problem statement. So we've got a longer version of this, which covers all of the background information. But for the purpose of this essentially captures what we're looking to achieve in this project. So we want to understand what the opportunities are to improve passenger safety in taxis and private hire vehicles in Wales. And we've decided to approach this with focusing on seldom heard groups. So I know during the consultation phase, Welsh Gov have engaged with a lot of organisations and charities focusing on these passengers in seldom heard groups. So we're really going to be focusing on them as priority in this project. Next slide, please. And in order to inform that problem statement, we needed to decide on some clear research objectives which would help us understand it. So as you can see, we've come to 5 main objectives here. The first was to understand passenger attitudes, behaviours and awareness of safety when travelling by taxis and private hire vehicles. And we're really hoping to kind of go under the skin of these passengers to understand this. So going a bit further than just speaking to them remotely, we really want to go to the place where they'll be experiencing their safety problems. So we're hoping to travel to see these people, potentially observe their taxi experiences, and then we'll really get that rich understanding of how this happens in the field. We also specifically want to identify what problems exist in the passenger safety space. So as Adrian mentioned, we're really avoiding solutionising. We really want to understand the problems first, and then later down the line, when we come to maybe do an alpha, we can explore how to solve those problems. So that's one of the main objectives as well. The third one is around evaluating whether improved information sharing could improve the safety of passengers. So this has been a key recommendation from various sources, but we really want to understand that from a technical perspective as well. So that's one of the reasons we've hired a business analyst who's joining us this week. She'll be really understanding what that information architecture looks like behind the scenes, so that we can understand how that information sharing might be improved and whether that actually links to passenger safety or not, because it is a bit of an assumption at this point. And then on the opposite side, we really want to understand taxi and private hire vehicle drivers' attitudes as well. So we're aware that there's two sides to this problem. So we really need to understand the side of the drivers too, as they're going to be aware of problems that potentially passengers might not be able to talk about or have different perspectives on. So we really want to make sure we cover that as well. And then lastly, we really just need to identify opportunities to improve passenger safety and confidence. So this is the main outcome of the discovery. And we're hoping that doing all of this research will really help inform that. Next slide, please. So in terms of how we're going to do that, we've had lots of conversations internally about this, and we've decided that we're going to do a mixture of in-person and remote research. So this is going to look like doing one-to-one interviews with passengers, drivers and licensing officers. We want to make sure we cover that spread of people. And we're also, like I say, going to go to the place where people use taxis. So we're really hoping to potentially observe at taxi ranks and potentially do ride-alongs and things like that, so that we get a really deep understanding of how this works in practice. We've also got a potential opportunity to do a workshop. So Adrian has put us in contact with children in Wales. So something we'd really love to do is get the perspective of children as well. This is still TBC at this point, but children are another passenger group who do travel in taxis, and obviously there is a big safety issue there potentially. So it's something that we'd like to cover in this research as well. And like I say, we are going to be prioritising the seldom heard groups in that as well. Next slide, please. So we've also had conversations about where we want this research to take place. It's really important that we do target the right areas to make sure we get a broad understanding of, the different situations that exist across Wales, because obviously if you look at a city location, it's going to give you very different experiences to somewhere maybe more coastal. So we decided that we wanted to cover areas that cover city, rural and coastal locations, as well as north, mid and south. And we've also worked closely with Welsh Gov to understand where certain problem areas might be, or where they've got particular insight that might be good to cover. So currently this is TBC, but we are looking at Bangor, Llandudno, Wells and Cardiff as our main contextual areas. So this is where we're looking to travel and hopefully, like I say, go to taxi offices or taxi ranks and potentially observe taxi journeys as well. Next slide, please. But we're also conscious that we want to get that even spread across all of Wales as well. So in our interviews and other methods, we will be looking to get an even spread across Wales in different areas to make sure we understand broadly what's happening and gain a better picture. Next slide, please. And just lastly, a little plea from us. Obviously, this all sounds good and well, but without users, we're really going to struggle to do this work. So if you are somebody that knows of people that might be relevant for us to speak to or can help us recruit users, we'd really appreciate your support. If you could pop your email address in the chat or email our user research inbox, then we can get in touch and support those interviews and contextual research, because like I say, without users we won't be able to do it, so we would really appreciate if you can help us. So thank you. And now I'm passing back over to you, James.
Thank you, Gabby. Right, so where does that lead us now, and what are our next steps? So we're aiming to, you can sort of see here, there's a calendar. So we're aiming to finish by the end of August, beginning of September, this discovery piece, where we'll have a list of recommendations for next steps. The way we work is in sprints. So sprints effectively are short time periods, in this case 2-week blocks, where we go in, we prioritize, we plan, and then we execute efficiently. So we're currently halfway through our second sprint here. So it's a 2 times 4 weeks project, so 8 weeks total. And by the end of the 8 weeks, we'll have a list of recommendations and next steps. The reason why we do these 2-week blocks is so we don't go down one path for too long and it leads to no fruition. So it's tight, you get your learnings and then you iterate and then you go again. That way we're efficient and we all work together for the right outcomes. So as I've said, 4 times 2 week sprints, and to touch upon what Gabby said, hiring a business analyst to better understand how local authorities can share their information, the taxi ride-alongs, where we're going with taxi drivers and with passengers, and further research as well. So that comes to the end of this show and tell. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Feel free to raise your hand in the chat. Alternatively, please contact us by email. Do I have any hands raised? I can't quite see. Don't see any hands raised.
Yeah. We've got a couple now.
Okay, who?
Steve
Desmond?
Wright?
Oh, sorry. Do you want to do Steve Wright? If you go first, if you unmute yourself, and then we'll follow with Desmond.
Yeah, thank you. I think this has been raised a couple of times in the chats. You're talking about having dialogue with drivers, but it's very, very important you have dialogue with operators. We work with 300 operators nationally, and we do billions of journeys, literally. So we manage the drivers, we manage the customers, and it was conspicuous by its absence in your presentation, and it's been raised a few times in the chat. Certainly, we only found out about this late last week, and I've actually got another one to go on to. Some notification of time would be helpful as well. And I should point out that August is the biggest time for holidays for the trade. It's the biggest time of the year. The trade really does downturn in August, and a lot of people will be away while you're doing your research timeline. So it's just a little bit of feedback for you. Thank you.
Yeah, 100%. I'll field that as well. We will definitely be speaking to operators, and we'll be trying to get out our invitations to speak to everybody as soon as possible. So thank you for that feedback, and we'll 100% be taking that on board, and really appreciate you you mentioning that. Desmond, would you like to go next?
Hello, good morning, everybody. On Gabby's presentation, there are 5 research objectives, and I noticed that number 4 touched upon the drivers and their attitudes and behaviours, but there should clearly be a 6th objective that centres around the safety of drivers. The issues they have to face, and I'm not a driver, I'm not here to represent them, are immense, and very much it's a one-sided argument, and I think that should be taken into account as a 6th objective. Another point just being picked up on in the user groups, it doesn't mention the PHOs, and you know, weithio in the southwest is a massive operator, and we hold a wealth of information that help your teams. I also think you should include in your user groups the various police forces in the south of Wales to talk on the safeguarding units and some of the everyday problems they meet. They have immense problems with passengers and a few drivers, so it'd be good to look at those generally for public safety. And I think if you step outside of Wales and go to the Avon and Somerset police and spend a few hours or half a day with their taxi cop, at PC Quentin, you'll see what a tremendous asset he is to the public safety, the licensing authorities, and also drivers. And I'm a firm believer that the taxi service should pay for that skill set, not only for public safety. It brings immense service to the taxi trade, and I would welcome it if you went outside and saw him. It'd be very beneficial for everybody, particularly the licensing officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Desmond. Considering it's a user research approach, I'll let Gabby field those points there, but thank you very much for raising them.
Yeah, thank you, Desmond. So the point around private hire operators, that's something that I didn't mention there, but it is in our recruitment screener. So hopefully that reassures you we are definitely looking to speak to operators. And then in terms of driver safety, this is something that we've talked about quite a lot internally. And we did pick up on the fact that we're not going to be able to touch on passenger safety without talking about driver safety, because they are inherently linked. So we do definitely take that on board. However, when we were scoping the project, this is only an 8-week discovery. So we decided that the scope for this will be predominantly focusing on passenger safety with a little flavour of driver safety. And then potentially later on, if that comes up as a bigger problem, then we could look to discover that in a separate project. So yeah, it is something we've thought about, and I do take your point on board. It is really important.
Fantastic. Do we have any other questions that people would like to voice? I've seen some in the chat there, and I've seen some people. Yeah, we can circulate the chat as well. Yeah, and we can include you guys as Bolt. We can speak to you guys as well. Basically, if you put anything in the chat, we'll answer you one by one. Are there any questions that people might want to ask now? And if there's anything that you want to ask privately, you can email us. You can email me, james.graham at Centre for Public Digital Services, or user.research as well. Is best practice to answer every question in the chat, guys? So, Sanwa, would you like to go next? I can see your hand raised.
Yeah, good morning. I think we need to highlight in Wales there's a sort of a monopoly creeping in with Vizu and Uber. So we need to focus on how they manage and practice and the fees and no shows and all that sort of thing towards the drivers, because if you just have 2 main operators in Wales, then there could be a situation, sort of dictatorship arrangement. So we need to look at that. I'm not going to go in deep. There's various subjects. Sorry, this is early mornings. So we need to focus on that as well. Thank you.
100%. Gabby, do you want to field that?
Yeah, of course. So I think in terms of sorry, would you be able to repeat your question? I had an answer and then I forgot what I was going to say.
So I'll give you an example. So say I'm working for Uber and a fare comes in. It doesn't happen with Uber now, but it happens with Vizu. So say I get a fare, say 4 miles up the road, and I go to take that fare 4 miles up the road, but the fare is only half a mile. So the drivers should have facilities or to refuse a fare due to not being financially viable. So things like that, and also no shows. So if a driver takes time, 15 minutes to drive to a certain location to pick up a fare and the fare is not there, they should be compensated, some sort of 10%, 20%, 20% fare, which doesn't happen with Vizu and drivers driving around and just going into no shows, so the passenger not showing up. So they should be compensated. So what I'm trying to say is there should be safety mechanism to protect drivers. But this is getting eroded because there's only a few operators operating in Wales That's my main concern. Thank you. I don't know if I explained myself there.
No, that was great. Thank you, Samwa. So yeah, we have thought quite a bit about the way that people book taxis. So certainly in our screener, we've included people who have maybe experienced, booking through Uber or Bolt or those kind of apps. But then we also want to gain experiences from, people that have called up or potentially gone to a taxi office or, all those different ways. So we want to understand a little bit about, what happens in those situations where somebody's booked through an app as well. And I think, we've talked a bit about fares and no-shows and all of those sorts of things, but because we're trying to not solutionize at this point, we're more focused on the problems that people experience. So during the discovery, we definitely expect to cover all of those topics, because naturally, if there are no shows, then that affects passenger safety, and also potentially drivers have a side to that as well. So I expect it's something we're going to cover, but we have to be careful about the fares element, because I'm aware that the taxi bill is potentially going to touch on that side of stuff as well. So the purpose of the discovery is much more focused on the problems that people face, and then we can potentially look to the solutions a bit later on. Hopefully that gives you a bit of insight to what we've been thinking about.
Thank you.
Adrian, I see your hands raised there. Would you like to jump in?
Thank you. Yeah, so thanks for your comments, Samwa. I was just going to say, those topics are certainly the focus of some of the work on the bill, and we had a meeting with trade union colleagues about some of those sort of matters yesterday. In fact, I think perhaps the focus of this work is going to be a little bit narrower, but certainly those matters are, very much in our minds.
Thank you.
Awesome, great, thanks guys. So yeah, I can see Andrew's put a question about guide dogs, and I know that Adrian's responded there. So yeah, we're going to be reaching out to as many people this week for engagement along the project. Yeah, private hire operators for sure. We'll be talking to those as well. Edwina has asked, when you talk about seldom heard groups and voices, can you give a steer on these types of groups, please? Gabby, would you mind giving a steer on that, please?
Yeah, of course. So I did pop a message in the chat. Something I didn't mention is that we've built a really detailed recruitment screener based on all of the consultation work that Welsh Gov have done before we came on board. So we've really been building on the contacts that we've already got for that. So it will include groups such as Black and minority ethnic groups, people with a range of access and inclusion needs. So we're definitely looking to include people who've maybe got a vision impairment, a physical impairment, learning disabilities and things like that. Also a range of ages. So I mentioned we're looking at children, but then also older people as well. So our aim is to be really kind of broad in who we're looking at. We want to include voices from all of those groups to make sure that we're representing their needs. So hopefully that gives you a bit of insight to that. I can't list every single one right now off the top of my head, but we are trying to take that broad approach.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. Harriet's mentioned it'd be great to put a couple of examples of kind of users we'd like to be put in touch with, what kind of people, organisations that use taxis a lot, just to help people on the call get an idea of what they may know. So yeah, we'll be sending out comms with more detailed asks of who we need to speak to. Yes. Yeah, we'll be sending out a copy of the chat. If there's any more messages that have come in, there's quite a few messages, so I'm trying to get through them as fast as possible for people. So in rural areas, there's a lack of transport, especially accessible for disabled people. Taxis for short journeys are important to fill gaps. So can there be some subsidy from Welsh Government drivers that feel they have to refuse short journeys because they aren't viable if the users are registered disabled or similarly can show a need? Adrian, have you seen that from Amy Nicholas there?
Apologies, I hadn't caught up with that one. I was just answering another comment in the chat.
Yeah, there's quite a few. Do you want me to read it out for you again?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay, so Amy Nicholas has asked, in rural areas where there is a lack of public transport, especially accessible for disabled people, taxis for short journeys are important to fill gaps. So can there be some subsidy from Welsh Gov so drivers don't feel that they have to refuse short journeys because they aren't viable if the users are registered disabled or similarly can show a need?
Okay, so we are through the bill looking at the taxi needs of people in rural areas, and particularly people who need particular types of vehicles. So kind of without jumping to what the solution is, it's kind of part of our thoughts, yes.
Okay, fantastic. Les, I can see your hand raised there. Would you like to ask a question? I think you're stuck on mute there, Les.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. I spoke the availability of taxis at night. People don't want to work. That's the biggest problem. And taxis not being available means that your night trade people, pubs, restaurants, are all being affected because they can't get home. Do you know what I mean? It's not about safety of drivers or safety of passengers. It's just people don't want to work. Do you know what I mean? Since the pandemic. I don't know what the solution is. I mean, I have quite a lot of cars. I run up to 50 cars. And I can only get 4 or 5 drivers out of the night time. And by 10 o'clock, you're down to 1, 2 drivers because they just don't want to be out there working with the drunks, that sort of thing. The other thing you've got to look at is the licensing officers or the licensing departments in each council. Ours is abysmal. Do you know what I mean? And I think last time we talked to Adrian, they were getting a collective response from licensing officers from different counties. Why are they doing a collective one? If they're individual county councils, each one should provide their own response, because most of them are working from home. They don't provide a service that we pay for. You know, they're not professional. I think it was looked at that the traffic commissioner was going to take over the licensing departments, so we got some sort of standard. Good or bad idea, I don't know. But we need a better system within the councils. Doesn't matter how bad they are, they still get paid at the end of each month. Okay, hope that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I can see Adrian's hand is raised. So Adrian, if you'd like to answer Les there, please.
Yeah, thank you, Les. So just to let you know then that the vast majority of local authorities did provide individual responses to our consultation, and the kind of matters you've raised about kind of working to standards are things that we are exploring for the legislation. So again, in our thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you, Les. I can see, Steve, you've asked, do we have the number of taxi and private hire vehicle operators in Wales? Yeah, we do have the number in our research somewhere. We have to strategically choose a representative sample of those. We won't be able to talk to every single one over the 8-week period. Neil Chappell, assume you're already aware of the Wales Licensing Expert Panel, which consists of local authority licensing leads across Wales. Thank you for saying you're keen to assist with this work. We'll definitely be in touch. Sheila, there is a chance that Disability Wales, other disabled groups are involved in this research consultation, as their involvement could give an overview. Yeah, we'll definitely be in touch with them as well. Sorry, guys, if people have answered you in the chat, I'm just trying to answer you on the call as well. Yeah, Les, we'll definitely be in touch with you for sure. And Ed, thank you for mentioning about your contacts. So I'm just trying to answer every single question here, guys. And then finally, Andrea, with reduction in bus services, taxis are becoming becoming far more important to fill gaps. I'd say they're essential for vision impaired people who have no alternative to using public transport. A concession would be very welcome. So yeah, thank you very much for that. Okay, For sure. Okay, yeah, you're welcome, Steve, for sure. I can see a big message has come in from Daniel Kirk. Keep them coming, guys. We're here to answer any questions. So on the provision of wheelchair access vehicles, I think more focus should be placed on increasing the number of WAV private hire car vehicles rather than taxis. Speaking with disabled passengers that require a WAV, they want a reliable private hire service so they can book a vehicle to collect them. It's unrealistic to expect wheelchair users to wheel themselves to the nearest taxi rank, which is likely miles away, if they're not in a city centre, or by wheeling themselves to the nearest main road in the hope they can flag one down. That's a really good point, and we're hoping that when we talk to people in that characteristic through our user research, that we'll be able to understand their problems in a really user-centred design way. So thank you for raising that. Sheila, how many taxis for hire operate a taxi voucher card scheme? I'm not entirely sure. Adrian, do you have an idea of how many taxis for hire operate a taxi voucher card scheme?
I don't, I'm sorry.
Okay, Sheila, we'll get back to you on that for that information. Thank you, Desmond, for saying you'll assist us. Yeah, and thank you for the questions, guys. They seem to have slowed down, so and I'm sure, like if you think of something after this call, we as a team, or myself, more than happy to field any question. We will be speaking to all stakeholders. Perhaps we didn't stress that enough in our initial presentation there, but we want to make sure that we're as representative as possible. Yeah, so thank you very much for everybody for attending today. Yeah, and like I said, if you've got any questions, please do get them over. I'll just ask one last time, any more questions before we end the presentation?